10 years ago, CRL began to transform itself from an organization that primarily built and maintained shared collections to an agency that ensures its community persistent and enduring access to critical physical collections and digital resources. CRL's mission to support original research in the humanities and social sciences remains the same today as it was in 1949 when CRL was founded. But the ways in which we have to fulfill that mission, have to evolve. Since 1949, we have been continually making original research possible that otherwise would not be possible by providing critical, uncommon resources and collections for people to use. We've been collecting newspapers, serials, dissertations, government documents through purchase and deposit of collections. And through that, the CRL members have built a shared collection of about 5 million volumes and about 51,000 serial titles. We do interlibrary loan and document delivery. Can we have the next slide, please? That continues. This year, or in the past, in the most recently finished fiscal year, the top users in terms of items borrowed were some of the large universities: Harvard, Chicago, Princeton, University of North Carolina, Chapel Hill, and University of Illinois, Urbana-Champaign. The next slide will show the top users in another category, the top users of materials that were digitized. And these are institutions where CRL digitized materials on request for scholars. These are the highest users in that category. In the next slide, we'll show you the institutions that are surging this year, whose use of CRL has increased this year. So interlibrary loan and document delivery is alive and well. This is the kind of, we showed you the numbers, or we showed you the statistical side of this picture, but the other side of the picture is that we're helping people like NYU postdoc scholar Alison Okuda document social change in Ghana through popular music. And in the annual report for this past year, you can read about Alison's project. Digital access, we added about 5.9 million pages to the digital resources online available for CRL this year. To come in the next fiscal year, we'll be starting to move, or in the next couple of fiscal years, we'll be starting to move over millions of pages more of digitized foreign newspapers, materials that were digitized for the World Newspaper Archive, and materials that were digitized for the Brazilian government, some of the human rights documentation, those kinds of things. So a great deal more material will be moved onto the servers, the CRL servers. We're also doing have a pretty rigorous schedule of webinars, and of which this year 202 libraries took advantage of from CRL. The licensing program served 132 different CRL libraries who took up offers negotiated by CRL for major databases. We have the next slide, please. Some things have changed, though, in the print realm and in the digital realm. In the print realm, the migration of knowledge and information to the digital realm is accelerating, and the supply chain for tangible materials, print and microform materials, from developing in strategically important world regions is measurably deteriorating. This is challenging our ability to continue to support research in a meaningful way. The challenges are ones of scale, where Google Books, Hockey Trust, and shared print programs like the RECAP program and the Scholars Trust, Big Ten Academic Alliance in West, and COPL in Canada, East and the Northeastern US, are aggregating holdings that are bigger than what we've seen before. The scale is important because because of the amount of pressure that's being put on libraries to divest of their own print holdings. So the scale of the cooperative operations have to increase. JSTOR, the JSTORization of research. We have the next slide. The JSTOR, Well, nothing new. It has raised the minimum expectations of researchers to include instant access, 24/7 access to research materials, and in short, microfilm isn't working anymore. The next element, retrenchment, is happening on collections at the national level. The Library of Congress, National Agricultural Library, those libraries are scaling back what they're collecting, scaling back the availability of their services to make materials available. And so that's putting more pressure on the university libraries and the other independent research libraries. And then we have, next slide, is supply chain issues. We have a supply chain that's just not working that well. CRL, we ourselves this year have experienced a very, very large backlog in orders of microform collections that the CRL is purchasing but are not being delivered. This backlog is actually several years long, and that seems to be characteristic of the microform market these days. We're also seeing increasing friction with microform in dealing with microforms. Vendor restrictions are increasingly restrictive and stringent. We are experiencing licenses when we purchase microfilm from vendors like Redex and others. We are being asked to sign licenses that will prohibit interlibrary loans of those. And so if we can't acquire a microform with the right to interlibrary loan, we're not acquiring microforms. British Library and the Bibliothèque Nationale are no longer producing microfilm, so that part of the supply chain is just not working. Library of Congress even has restricted their sales of microform, or their distribution of microform of foreign newspapers. Newspapers they microfilm in their Delhi office and other offices, other overseas operations offices. That's creating some problems in the supply chain as well. Last April, many of you attended a forum that CRL, the Global Resources Forum that CRL hosted, At Risk, Stewardship, Due Diligence, and the Future of Print. The next slide, please. The conversations and the presentations at that forum convinced us or deepened our sense of the growing threat of the survival and accessibility of print collections in North American libraries. At the forum, Deanna Markham, then managing director of Ithaca S&R, made a compelling case for the urgency of coordinated, decisive action on a national level. As Deanna Markham warned, we are running out of time. Next slide. What's changed? In the digital realm, scale also. What's changed in the digital realm? Sorry, we finished with print. In the digital realm, scale also. Next slide. The government information, the scale of information being produced by governments has grown enormously. William McAllister, in his 2005 paper, the Digital Big Bang, talked about the proliferation of government agencies that were all publishing and putting out documents and creating documentation and evidence. The scale of information being produced at the government level is enormous and exploding, and there are real challenges to the long-term access to that, as you can signaled by this year by the concern around the removal of data from the Environmental Protection Agency site and some of the Department of Energy sites and data rescue operations that were conducted to prevent that. Speed, next slide. The news now travels at a speed that it never traveled at before. The New York Times, Financial Times, The Economist, Frankfurter Allgemeine Zeitung are all generating news. Their news cycle has shrunk to being in terms of seconds rather than hours, and that taxes the abilities of our traditional collecting bodies like CRL, Library of Congress, and other national libraries to maintain the record of world news. So at the speed at which the news is disseminated now and news is consumed now, providing the text of an Iraqi newspaper on microfilm 2 years after that newspaper went to press is no longer okay. Next, privatization. The E-Desiderata Forum that we held in November alerted us or deepened our concern about the privatization of critical economic, political, geospatial, and demographic information, driven largely by the growth of the financial industry and the national security industry. This privatization of data and documentation, even data documentation originally published in open access by governments, is tilting the playing field toward corporate and private sector researchers and away from academic and public policy research. As a result, unfavorable terms and the tendency the libraries are getting, or academic scholars are getting unfavorable terms for access to these materials, and there's a tendency of these vendors to neglect and even to purge historical data from the databases. So academic researchers' interests are not being served. A lot of the arrangements for access to these kinds of large databases are created without the involvement of libraries. They're very often made on the basis of, or made by individual scholars or department or programs at universities, and the libraries are really out of that supply chain. So these developments in the print realm and in the digital realm now require us to accelerate the transformation on both print and digital fronts and project an ambitious future for CRL. In our effort to ensure the community persistent and enduring access to critical physical collections and digital resources, CRL now finds itself, as it did, next slide, in 1949 at the center of an immense generational challenge. Where to then? Next slide. In their print in December, we posted the CRL agenda for shared print for 2017-2026. It outlined our strategy for stewardship of print serials in North America over the next 10 years. The agenda is part of CRL's shared resources strategy. Two imperatives from the emerged from the at-risk forum last year, and they're part of this agenda. First, CRL must enable North American member libraries to rapidly but responsibly manage down the size and cost of their print serial holdings. We now provide secure archiving and access for over 50,000 journal titles, but that's not enough. The partnership with Linda Hall has modeled a distributed arrangement and established the feasibility of building complete audited runs of an additional 40,000 serial titles in areas of science, technology, and engineering. I'm happy to say that we have just renegotiated the partnership with Linda Hall Library, and the new term of the partnership is 10 years. The new agreement has more teeth and more transparency to it. The next stage is to replicate that model in the area in the realm of the humanities and social sciences. There, we have to act aggressively to vastly enlarge the universe of print serials that we both preserve and deliver rapidly to the community. In his at-risk presentation, at the At-Risk Forum, James O'Donnell of Arizona State University spoke about the difficulty in today's higher education environment of making a case for the funding for preservation of low-use materials. O'Donnell said, given the degree to which Amazon has elevated faculty and student expectation for access to books, the salvation of print in our time and in the future consists of digitization. Bringing physical objects together, conserving and preserving them as best you can, and providing digital backup copies is a way of preservation. The digital preservation of the individual book needs to be there as a vehicle to keep the physical book alive. There will be copyright issues, and we will address them responsibly. But the need to move beyond the low-hanging fruit in digitization and archiving those public domain works and U.S. government documents is critical. With funding from the Andrew W. Mellon Foundation, we're beginning to figure out the size of the known universe, or what we're calling the critical corpus of humanities and social science serials that are worthy of being preserved. At this stage, we estimate, even at this early stage in this study, we estimate that CRL should provide its members close to 10 times what we now provide. Therefore, bold new measures are in order. We're exploring ways to combine resources with Big Ten Academic Alliance, Hockey Trust, COPL in Canada, East, West, Scholars Trust, and other programs to provide sustainable and affordable archiving of a critical mass of humanities and social science serials. We have the next slide, please. Back up one, yeah. Great. Archiving must include not only a credible commitment to preserve and further develop holdings, but also rapid access and preferably, next slide, electronic access to the preserved materials. Martha Ruska and others on CRL's Collections and Services Policy Committee stressed to us the importance of putting long-term assurances in place as CRL's network of partners expands. Assurance of both preservation and accessibility are indeed necessary to enable withdrawal of local print holdings by our member institutions and to enable those member libraries to make informed, defensible decisions on collection stewardship. Consequential and irreversible decisions like those cannot be based on incomplete or untested data, unfounded assumptions, or statements of intent alone. We need a credible narrative. Next slide, please. We need a credible narrative which, for what we're doing, is compelling to scholars. Our approach must address scholars' concerns. In a recent comment on the Common Knowledge blog, Samuel Cassidy and Liz Mance of Western University invoked the specter of Nichols and Baker and the double-fold controversy of 2001, when libraries were condemned for embracing microfilm as a solution to the brittle books problem. Samuel and Liz cited, quote, the critical importance of a narrative for scholars about CRL's agenda that fully and clearly discloses how CRL will protect and preserve legacy shared collections, aside from digitizing them. Therefore, the CRL agenda combines archiving and collection development, active curation, gap filling and completing runs of serials archived. We believe that a complete, well-curated run at one repository is better than multiple unaudited partial runs that are stored miles apart. To set priorities on fulfilling this agenda, we can adapt the template used by TRAIL, the Area Materials Projects, and the Global Resources Projects. These are projects that are hosted by and operate under the umbrella of CRL. These are cooperative collection development projects. These are which draw upon the expertise of specialized librarians and scholars to identify priorities. In the last 10 years, CRL has put in place the technology infrastructure to support this sort of cooperative action. And in CRL's online workspace, hundreds of participants and community of interest are already actively building and preserving collections. Because the scope of our ambition is ended, because the scope of our agenda is so ambitious, we have to exploit products of our community's investment as well. Brittle books and other serials microform projects that in the past, or in the 1970s, 80s, and 90s, captured decayed brittle books and serials and preserved those for use. We need more data about those microform holdings to determine what has already been preserved by reformatting, even though it's only microfilm reformatting. But to help us make decisions. Databases of digitized serials produced by libraries and by JSTOR and by other trusted commercial partners, commercial publishers. These organizations, libraries and organizations operating in the for-profit sector have, like it or not, already preserved a lot of important serials. We need to bring the data about those serials together to help us inform our decisions about what we're going to hold on to and archive in physical form. Serials preserved also in electronic form by digital preservation services like clocks and Portico have to be factored into our equation. And we need to exert our influence on clocks and Portico to expand their coverage of the long tail of published journal and serial publications. The digital side, where to? Next slide, please. The other part of CRL's shared resources strategy is the digital side. Through analysis and licensing of digital resources, we've begun to position CRL to to engage the major providers of global data on behalf of libraries to ensure long-term access to critical foreign digital information. We do this in two ways. Our efforts are on two fronts. First, focus. Next slide. We're concentrating CRL efforts on access to data and documentation produced outside the academy, not on the academic journals or the scholarly journals produced by faculty and researchers within academia, but on essential materials that produced outside the academy, like financial, news, demographic, and geospatial data and information that are, although produced outside the academy, are essential to academic research. These kinds of materials are not being preserved well or comprehensively. Next, collectivize. We need better terms of access for the big databases that our libraries are investing in. CRL has begun already, has for the past several years been dealing with some of the large publishers of these kinds of materials, and we've successfully negotiated pretty good terms for a number of databases. And as I pointed out earlier, it's about 130 CRL libraries that are benefiting by that. We are now starting to work with the Canadian Research Knowledge Network, JISC, in the UK, and Canadian Research Knowledge Network in Canada, JISC in the UK, and the Deutsche Forschungsgemeinschaft in Germany, and with the national site licensing operations in those countries to identify common needs and terms and interests that can be negotiated with the large providers of data, because these providers are indeed quite large. We are exploring supporting library-based, in fact, we are supporting library-based digital preservation and access efforts. The Reveal Digital project that was initiated a few years ago by a number of libraries, and most of them CRL members. CRL has given support this past year, helped organize the funding campaign this year that put them over the top for production of their first major collection. We've been working with the Law Libraries Microform Consortium to digitize, which is a consortium of about 250 law libraries, to digitize important legal and government materials. We are now, this afternoon, we'll be exploring in the Global Collections Forum partnerships with other university-based organizations like the Minnesota-based IPUMS program, which is collects, aggregates, and preserves census microdata from various parts of the world. We think that there's potential for libraries to more closely coordinate with and support those operations that do make a lot of important data available in open access. Under the Global Collections Initiative, which was funded by the Andrew W. Mellon Foundation this year, CRL will be working with the libraries not only in the US and Canada but abroad to identify critical databases that need preserving, and also identify critical data for accurate digitization and for hosting on the web in open access and in community access. Next year's meeting, the CRL meeting next year, will be devoted. It will be an in-person meeting, a face-to-face meeting. We do that every other year. The last one was the At-Risk Forum last year. Next April, we will have our in-person meeting here in Chicago. We'll be on global data, and this will explore the challenges, issues, and opportunities that libraries are facing in providing access to important global data. How do we pay for this? The important thing. Next slide, please. The big how. The activities that I described, the new activities that I described, have to now be put on a permanent footing, financial footing. The fiscal year 2018 budget that we present for your adoption today will have major consequences for the future of the CRL enterprise. In the last 10 years, we've made a significant new investment in activities determined to be of high value to members and consistent with CRL's historic mission: digitization of primary source collections, evaluation and licensing of electronic resources, and tools for collection analysis, such as the paper registry and the ICON database. This investment also enabled us to to begin to provide access to a vastly expanded library of science, technology, and engineering serials and primary law and government publications through partnerships with Linda Hall Library and the Law Library Microfilm Consortium. We made these new investments while continuing to maintain the growth of our print and microform collections. Unfortunately, living in both worlds is no longer feasible. In an era of diminished public funding and growing digital costs, the expense of that is more than we think our community can bear. Therefore, the proposed budget for fiscal year 2018 reflects a winding down of some long-standing CRL activities. This is necessary for us to continue to deliver services of high value and to focus on access to critical global data and the survival of at-risk primary source materials from all world regions. This is a matter of achieving the necessary scale to operate in today's environment. Specifically, we propose to scale back the building of certain physical collections at CRL to invest in delivering materials identified by scholars and specialists, specifically identified by scholars and specialists at CRL libraries, discontinuing just-in-case acquisition of materials that have been largely superseded by online resources. It will continue, for example, to provide access, next slide, access to all CRL collections in print and microform, to collect and catalog foreign dissertations and theses, to acquire microform archives and collections requested by member libraries and identified through the annual purchase proposal and shared purchase voting programs, to support microfilming and service of foreign newspapers identified as important by the area materials projects, by the area studies project working under our umbrella. We'll continue on-demand and planned digitization of collections to create digital resources that serve the actual needs of researchers, including Global Collections Initiative and World Newspaper Archive and others. Again, the collections, we will talk this afternoon about the Global Collections Platform, which is we're putting in place this year to facilitate member engagement in setting our digitization priorities. In short, our services and our programs will be more member-driven, will be more driven by the members' interests. We will no longer, next slide, subscribe to the approximately 400 vended print serials titles outside CRL's core historical areas of focus. This is a trade-off with the providing access to the 20 or 30,000 serials through the Linda Hall, serial titles through the Linda Hall program. We will discontinue routine microfilming of some foreign newspapers which we are having difficulty acquiring and which nobody is buying. These are microfilm newspapers these are foreign newspapers that we would microfilm for and then sell copies of. The demand for those copies has reduced almost to zero. We are discontinuing too certain purchases of domestic and foreign newspapers on microfilm from ReadX, Library of Congress, and others that impose restrictions on the use and sharing of those materials. As I said before, a lot of the purchases of microfilm now come with terms that prohibit us from lending those microforms. So there's really very little sense in continuing to have them. Instead, we are focusing resources on electronic access to online news and exploring the harvesting of online news directly from the web. These changes are detailed in the guide to the CRL budget that is posted on the website for the this annual meeting. I want to point out, next slide, that even with these changes, these reductions, CRL's total annual investment in collections and collection-related resources next year, its core value to the membership, will be significantly greater than they were 5 years ago. CRL's commitment to the integrity and accessibility of critical documentation evidence remains undiminished, while our ability to fulfill our mission is strengthened. We do recognize the need for CRL to transform its services while staying true to its historic mission. And many of you have voiced concern that CRL maintain its role in ensuring access to the long tail of research materials. But we believe that by not addressing the real and looming threats to the survival of critical evidence and information that researchers actually use today and need today, we are abandoning our responsibility to researchers of the future. That's what CRL was doing in 1949. That was what CRL was formed to do. The world requires that we do it in different ways today. Given the state of the economy, though, we're reluctant again this year to ask for new support from member institutions. Your institutions that have been stalwart in supporting the growth and integrity of the shared collections over seven decades, while many other U.S. research libraries have chosen to free ride on that investment. In fact, this year, 27 of member libraries' cost shares will drop. Not significantly, but they will drop. 26 other members' cost shares will stay the same as they were this year. Aside from reallocating funds from certain subscriptions and microfilming activities, we also propose to leverage partnerships with other allied organizations. The Global Collections Initiative will enable us, provides us some funding to attempt to expand membership and partnerships beyond North America. Already we brought into the partnership on the project the University of London, Oxford University in the UK, the University of Glasgow in the UK, the University of Göttingen, and the Ibero-Americanisches Institute in Germany. We are working, as I said, with our other national cooperative collecting and cooperative site licensing organizations, the Canadian Research Knowledge Network in Canada, JISC in UK, and the Deutsche Forschungsgemeinschaft in Germany, to coordinate licensing activities to optimize our investment of resources. You're the shareholders. The title of our fiscal year 2006 annual report is investment. You, the voting members, as voting members, your institutions have invested significantly in building and maintaining the shared collections. You have invested money, some like our founding members have invested millions, in fact, over the years. You've also invested time and expertise and entrusted CRL with your collections. Many of you participated in the CRL conversation this year on the Common Knowledge blog and webinar presentations. We drew upon experts from your staff, from staff at Princeton University, University of Illinois, Urbana-Champaign, Stanford, Harvard, Vanderbilt University, University of Minnesota, the Ontario Council on University Libraries, aside from those I already mentioned in my report, we also appreciate the input and the advice that we've gotten from Mark Watson of the University of Oregon, Linda DiBiase, University of Washington, Judith MD at Kansas, Jeff Kosakoff at Duke, Daniel Dollar at Yale, Greg Raschke at North Carolina State, Jeff Carroll at Columbia, and others. These are all people that have shared their thoughts on the print agenda and on CRL's digital agenda during the course of the year. This has been an important dialogue. We've made, I think, gone to great lengths to make our plans and our activities transparent and to solicit the advice and expertise and the interests of our members. But the decision on these matters are yours, and so that is why we ask you to approve CRL's budget for fiscal year 2018.